How's it everyone, Grant here. Welcome to my camera comparison video between the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II and the Google Pixel 4 XL. So this will be a camera comparison in some good lighting conditions. So if you're looking for a low light comparison, I'll be doing a separate video on that. So stay tuned to the channel for that video. Also, please note that all the photos I took on the Xperia 1 Mark II were with Sony's Photo Pro app in auto mode. And I know they're marketing this towards more the pro camera user and all of its manual features, but there are a lot of videos showing off the manual capabilities on the Xperia 1 Mark II, far better than I can. I really want to showcase this as what you can get from a point and shoot experience, especially up against the point and shoot king right now, the Google Pixel 4 XL. And so I'll show you a whole bunch of photos and videos, and stay tuned to the end because I'll let you know what my observations are, as well as which camera is probably best for you and why. So let's go ahead and take a look at all the photos and videos. Hey everyone, so here we are in the park with the normal tests that I do in these comparisons. I like to do it here because there's a lot of blue and a lot of green, so you should be able to see how these phones reproduce these colors. And I've got HDR turned off on the Sony to keep it more real to life here on the colors. And there's active noise wind filtering on the Sony that's on, so let's see if that makes a difference in the audio between these two. And last thing I'll note is that you cannot switch between the cameras once you start recording on either of these phones. So on the Sony, you've got the ultra wide, the wide, and the telephoto. Once you start recording, you're locked into that lens. So these are both on the standard wide lens right now. And we can go ahead and pan over to the right and do the usual zoom test on the cell phone tower. So 2 times there on the Pixel, and let's go up to about 2 times on the Sony. And so on the Pixel 4 XL, I can go all up to 8 times digital. And on the Sony, I can go up to 3 times zoom. Now, if you want to get closer with the Sony, you would have to go and switch the lenses. So you can go 3 times zoom on each lens. So if I wanted to go to an equivalent of about 8 times zoom like you're seeing on the Pixel 4 XL, I would have to shoot in a telephoto lens and then zoom in 3 times. But since I can't switch between the lenses, that's pretty much all you're gonna get here. And I'll zoom back out on both phones and we'll do some autofocus tests here on the post. So the Pixel's focusing up and refocusing away pretty quickly here. And we can go ahead and test the Sony here. Focus away, let's see. There we go. So I think it's about the focusing distance that you have to get right. I noticed that the minimum focusing distance isn't the best here on the Xperia. But once you get to the right focusing distance, it'll focus up pretty quickly. There we go. So notice that about this distance, it's okay. But if I want to get a little bit closer, it makes it a little bit tougher, I think. So get to the right distance and it'll get to the right focus. There you go. So let's go ahead and test stabilization as I walk down these stairs. There is video stabilization on both these phones, especially at 1080p. So let's see how these perform here. And we'll pan back up into the sky just to see how it handles that exposure. All right, here we go. Same test, this time at 1080p, 60 frames per second. Set on both. The Pixel's able to do explicit 60 frames per second now. And give you an idea, here's some of the bushes blowing in the wind there. See a little bit more movement here at 60 frames per second. And we'll test the zoom. So 2 times there on the Pixel and about 2 times there on the Sony. And we'll go all the way up. 6 times digital here compared to 8 times at 30 frames per second on the Pixel. And still your 3 times on the Sony. So if you zoom out on both, there we go. We can do some autofocus again at 60 frames per second on the Pixel first. Pixel is still real nice and quick at pretty much whatever distance I pick. We'll try out with the Sony now, the Xperia 1 Mark II. And it's not focusing, right? I mean, if we go a little bit farther, there it is. So it likes this distance. So if I refocus away and then come back in, it locks in. Away, and boom, it locks in. So minimum focusing distance, again, not that great. Now, stabilization at 60 frames per second here. Let's see how both of these perform at 60 frames. And one last pan around the park, up into the afternoon sky. Okay, one last test, 4K 30 frames per second. Neither of these phones can do 4K 60, or the Sony should be able to do it, but I don't see a setting for that. So if you know, let me know. I'll also do some more playing around. But anyway, because the Pixel can't do it anyway, we're just gonna do apples to apples, 4K 30 frames per second here. And please note the colors, because at 4K, sometimes these phones can get really off in their color reproduction. And so let's go over here and test the zoom at 4K. So again, 2 times zoom on the Pixel and 2 times zoom there on the Xperia 1 Mark II. And you should get back your 8 times digital there on the Pixel, which you do. Pretty clear and steady in the viewfinder. And let's go 3 times there on the Sony. Again, if you want to get in further, you're going to have to go and use a telephoto lens, then zoom in on the Sony, but 3 times is all you're getting here on the main lens. So let's back that out. and autofocus at 4K. So again, on the Pixel first. And this Pixel autofocus is really nice, locks in on the post really quickly and refocuses really quickly. And so again, let's get the distance right with the Sony. There you go, locks in focus and refocuses. There you go. So again, get the right focusing distance and the Sony will focus up pretty quickly. All right, stabilization test down the stairs at 4K. This should also be doing okay with the stabilization on both these phones. And one last pan around the park.
That's how I got that heat, let's go.
Hey everyone, so here's a quick clip from the front-facing cameras from the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II and the Pixel 4 XL. Now both of these can record up to 1080p, 30 frames per second, and I really wouldn't expect too much from performance from these front-facing cameras, especially in video recording like this, but if you're in a pinch and you have to use them, this is about the video quality you would expect. It's some pretty good shade, so not a lot of harsh lighting. This is about as best as these cameras can probably do in outdoor settings. So we'll go ahead and walk so you can see the stabilization and how these front-facing cameras perform. But hopefully that gives you a better idea of how these front-facing cameras compare. Hey everyone, so now you've seen all the photos and videos for yourself, I'll let you know what my observations are and who I think each of these cameras are probably best suited for. So first off, the details in the Sony photos were a lot more comparable to the details retained in the Pixel photos, even after cropping all the way in, and I really thought that would have been a runaway by the Pixel, but the Sony details in their photos were actually very good, so really nice job by Sony there. Secondly, I really thought the blues in the skies, or the colors in general, would have been more natural on the Sony. But as far as the blue skies are concerned, the Pixel actually had the more natural blues, while the Sony had a lot more aggressive coloring there. And my last major observation for the photos is that the Sony bokeh, not even in portrait mode, just natural close-up macro photography, creating a natural background blur. The Sony is much more aggressive and just blurs out the whole background, while the Pixel actually does a more natural looking bokeh or background blur, where it's a little more layered and not just completely blurred out. So for me, personal preference there, but I like the Pixel because of that. And that's just an observation I noticed. The Sony is a lot more aggressive in that natural bokeh. And as far as videos, I think it was probably a toss-up. I think you can pick which one you like more. Neither of the cameras really wowed me as far as the video performance were. And if you're wondering where the colors were, I think it's somewhere in between. I thought the Pixel was a little bit washed out, while the Sony was just a tad bit too saturated or a little bit too hyped. But I think the natural color was somewhere in between there. I think audio on both were fairly good. I thought the wind canceling did okay on the Sony. It wasn't anything overly impressive. And the stabilization was fairly decent on both. So as far as video performance, I could probably go either way. And so now, which one did you actually prefer, the Pixel or the Sony? And I think the answer is going to be depending on which approach to photography you like, because they pretty much take completely opposite approaches here. The Pixel will obviously appeal to more of the point and shoot person like me, where there's just an auto mode, there is no pro or manual mode, and the Pixel is going to use its computational photography and its own algorithms to give you the best possible photo without you having to manipulate it. So you just point, shoot, it's going to give you the best possible photo that it thinks it can give you, and it's not going to leave you with a lot of control in that manner. But because of that, it is capable of giving you a lot more of those wow moments. So when you snap a photo, sometimes it's processing, and once it finishes, it just looks like wow. It applies that HDR effect, and it just comes out to be something that you never really expected. And so for a lot of people, that can be very good or not so good. For a lot of control freaks who want absolute control over how their photos look, maybe not so much. But for people who just want to point, shoot, and have a really good looking photo, it has a lot more of those wow moments. And I think that's what people like about it. And it's going to be a lot more instantly shareable. And so moving over to Sony and their approach to photography, definitely much more geared towards the prosumer or the pro camera user. Their emphasis on bringing in their Sony camera alpha team to design a Photo Pro app to go along with their Cinema Pro app really shows that they want you to use these custom pro apps and not so much the stock camera and its auto mode. And that's really evident because they really had made no real improvements in the stock camera app. The portrait mode in the stock camera app hasn't really been improved, and it was never very good in previous models. They actually took away the 960 frames per second super slow motion from it. They even omitted a night mode in the stock camera app, and there are rumors that it's coming, but the fact that it's not there on launch shows you where their priorities were. And they also don't have a dedicated macro mode, which has been very popular on cameras this year. And lastly, their usability on zoom isn't very good. You can see that they're really geared towards the pro user because there is no slider that takes you from zoomed all the way out to zoomed all the way in. You have a 3x zoom per lens. So if you're on the main lens, you can zoom in 3 times. If you want to zoom in farther than that, you have to switch over to the telephoto lens, then zoom in an additional 3 times for probably what's equivalent to about a normal 8 times digital zoom. So it's not like an iPhone where you can actually zoom all the way out, slide it all the way to zoom all the way in, and it automatically switches between the lenses for really nice usability. You actually have to know what you're doing and switch between the lenses and get to the right zoom level that you want. And so because of all that, the auto mode or the stock camera app isn't really what Sony's focus was. They want you to use that Photo Pro, that Cinema Pro, where they built in all the manual controls to give you full control over the cameras on this phone. And if you know what you're doing, you're gonna get some really nice results. But for the rest of us who just like to point and shoot, Sony's probably not going to be the route for you. You'll probably be happier with the Pixel 4 XL. So with all that out of the way, I personally prefer the Pixel 4 XL because I am more of a point and shoot person. I like the results that the Pixel 4 tends to give me, and I do really like those wow moments that it provides. But I must say that I am impressed with how the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II performed here, and it kept up with the Pixel 4 XL much more than I thought it would. I do think the photography is much more improved here on the Mark II than previous Sony phones. And I do like how it gives you more flexibility. So it gives you a much more neutral photo, and it gives you a lot of room to play with and edit after the fact. So if you do like to play your photos, I do think you're going to like the Sony Xperia 1 Mark II. Now, of course, that's just what I think about how each of these cameras performed. Let me know in the comments which one you preferred and why. Any other questions or comments, leave them down below. And as always, thanks for watching.